So if you said something silly just the past 5 minutes, just Richard will hear it.
Where are you going, Jessica? You're not gonna watch my answer.
Good luck, though.
Heartfelt response there.
Sorry.
Okay?
All right. So I think everyone's all seen those commercials, right? With the attorneys on the commercial, and he starts telling you, you or a loved one has been affected by this medication. You have a lawsuit. Now, to us, we kind of find that amusing. You know, like, oh, I kind of want a lawsuit. I want some money. But think about it. What if it's your loved one or a family member or someone really close to you that got affected by one of these medications? How would you feel?
Bad.
You'd feel bad. You'd be worried. You don't know what's going to happen to them. And on top of that, you'd probably be angry at the fact that they didn't test for these results. You'd be angry that they're not trying to find out if it's going to hurt you or not. Well, take that perspective onto a national scale. Now, what would happen if we had a mass incident like this where it happened for everybody? Not just most people that you know. I'm talking about your brother, sister, every single person, every loved person that you know. Okay? Well, today, I want to talk to you guys and encourage everyone to educate themselves on the GMOs and to take heed and to avoid them whenever possible / logical. So today I want to go over with you guys the physical and the physiological dangers of them, which include how they affect our bodies and the physical environments that they're affecting around us. I want to go over the ethical issues that it's having. It's having an effect issues with farmers and not only that, some lies and monopolization of the industries. And also I want to go how you guys can avoid them, what we can do in these situations. Now, we all heard of GMOs, but no one really understands. Most people don't really understand what it is. Now, what is a GMO? Now, for centuries, we have always all been using genetic modifications. How? House cats, dogs, Mendels's peas. Natural selection is a form of genetic modification because you're modifying the genetics that you want. Now, genetic engineering, on the other hand, is when you take a gene from one organism and you transplant it into another organism. See, now that's where the main issue comes from. That's one of the issues right there. A lot of people have food allergies. Now, when you take these allergies and you take certain traits from certain things, like say if you take a trait from a cod and you put it into a tomato to make it rot longer or last longer, what happens if you have a shellfish or a fish allergic reaction? What happens when you take peanut allergies and you put those genetic genes into other foods in order to make them last longer or be more resistant to pesticides? Now, the problem is that genetic allergens from GMOs haven't been very proven yet because it's a long-term effect. But according to a study that's held by UCLA and CNN, there have been studies that show and conclude that allergic reactions to foods have completely skyrocketed in the past 7 years alone. 7 years alone since 2003, that's when pesticides and GMOs were first introduced. So there's a very strong correlation. Now the next health issues that we have is that our genetics interact with these modifications. And when our body's designed, all our bodies are designed to break down certain proteins and certain codes, so they have certain things they're supposed to do. Now when you modify these proteins, all of a sudden you're introducing a completely new code. Now what happens when your body interacts with these codes and it changes one cellular interaction? That's called cancer. That's all it takes. It takes one cell to be changed and how it interacts with these interactions, and that's called cancer, literally. So, studies by the International Journal of Biological Sciences has showed that these organ failures have been occurring inside rats when they would take these 3 main strains of the GMOs in the corn. These 3 strains of GMOs of corn that we all eat were first originally produced for pigs, pig feed, and now we're turning into human consumption, and rats are dying from it. But we're eating them. We'll figure that. Now, the next issue with this genetic issues is the plant decomposition rate. Now, when you spray these plants with pesticides, they'll die out from these oils, they'll go away. But when you genetically modify them, all of a sudden these breakdowns don't happen anymore. These wash-offs, all these poisons, they don't disappear. They start accumulating. They start accumulating, and they start accumulating more on the ground. And a good example of these is something called the rapeseed. I'm not sure if anyone knows what the rapeseed is, but it sounds like a weird name, but it's a very, very, very widely used product that we use today. We use it for fertilizer. We use it for biodiesel fuel, meaning our trucks can literally run off of this stuff. And with a little bit of genetic modification, we eat it now. So get that. You guys are eating cooking oil right now that is used to make a car run. Now, normally with a car, you have combustion, things are burning, things are running, but with DNA and genetics, all of a sudden, these aren't the same things. Because like I said, these little molecules transplanting and interacting with each other. It's not the same thing as combustion. Now, another physical damage that's having to our environment is it's actually affecting the bees. use of GM pesticides, genetic modified pesticides called neonicotinoids and GMCs for these genetically modified seeds for this specific strain of pesticide is starting to yield possible clues as to the disappearance of all the bees that we've had lately. As you know, this has become a really epidemic of an issue lately. We've all learned in elementary school that we need bees. Without bees, we have no food. No food, no animals, no feeding us, basically. Well, in an interview with a local Iowa farmer, Heather Pilotic, the co-director of Pesticide Action Network of North America, representing the Huffington Post, confirms that the Corn Belt, the actual Corn Belt itself, is killing bees. It's kind of weird, isn't it? The thing that the bees are supposed to be pollinating and feeding us with is directly killing them. How is that possible? You've been doing this for hundreds and thousands of years. How is it all of a sudden now they're just killing them? Well, she stated that the bees will go through 4 different exposure rates to this neonicotinoid. They'll be sprayed first, then they're going to start harvesting the pollination that's been sprayed, that's also been genetically modified to take this spray. Then they'll collect water that's been contaminated with sprays and toxics. And then they'll go onto the fields that are next door, that aren't regulated, that aren't controlled. This is just regular dandelions, whatever. These dandelions have been accumulating toxic pesticides all these years. And they haven't been washed, they haven't been cleaned, they haven't been refertilized or anything like that. These are just normal plants that have been accumulating, and all of a sudden these bees don't pollinate them now. And then they go feed their larvae, and their larvae grow up with this contaminated pollen, / water, / nutrients. So, if bees can't pollinate it and bees are dying, why would you want to eat it? Why would you want to force that upon your children and your friends and your family and everyone else in the entire public to eat that food? 94% of the 92 million acres of corn made this year are going to be treated with this pesticide. And there are actually going to be 2 of the variations of this one pesticide. It's called clothianidine and thiamethoxam. Now, according to an article by the National News that was conducted on a study held by the University of Purdue in Indiana, they confirmed that these 2 chemicals have a direct fatal effect with bees. Instant death, to kill them. But we're using these pesticides in all our food, and about 80% of all our foods are pesticide GMOs. They're not modified to rot longer, they're modified to resist pesticides. These specific pesticides are killing your bees. So you take it for what it's worth. Now, according to GMOlabeling.org, beekeepers themselves have been petitioning for this. They've been against this agent, and it's been supported by over 1 million different U.S. citizens. Now, these GMOs aren't just affecting us physically. They're having ethical issues in our society as well now. Big companies like Bayer and Monsanto, they're almost all associated with negative connotations. As soon as it said Monsanto, everyone got a negative connotation immediately. I'm sure they did. No one thought, oh, what a great company. I'm sure they thought something negative along those lines. Do some research and know finding out why. Okay, regulations and insect resistance, being bugs that have been evolving because of all the insecticides, these have pushed other insecticide classes, per se, off the market. So pretty much just kind of open the floodgate for Monsanto just to rush in and take over with their neonicotinoids. And Monsanto's Roundup, you guys have heard of that, Roundup, it's a pesticide. Monsanto is the people that food, right? Well, they're also the originators of Roundup, but it's a major chemical company. Major chemical company is also creating our food that we're eating. So, now the corn rootworm, if you guys have heard of that, it's a little worm that pretty much destroys cover crops. Well, there's a variation that started, and it started outsmarting us. It started like we go with something called crop rotation. You change crop rotations every season, or certain times of season to trick the bugs. Well, they started catching on to that. Well, because they started catching on to it, the demand for the insecticides started jumping up again and entered Monsanto. So, the problem with these genetic seeds that they're creating for their Roundup is that they're putting legalization patents on them. So, basically after monopolizing the entire industry, whenever something like, let's say, a bee would cross-pollinate from farm to farm, let's say a wind carries some seeds across the thing, we all know that happens. Well, all of a sudden now Monsanto had a lawsuit against 145 farmers ever since then, and they sued them. They've all lost their property and lost their farms. And now, Monsanto owns their farms. So there's another ethical issue with them as well. So, the last ethical issue I want to present is the lack of testing that we have done on these. So like I said, we all have physiological damages, and we need to test in order to know what's going to happen to us. Well, according to a research group from the UC Santa Cruz, very little testing has been done for this situation. They haven't been doing any testing, human testing on it. It's been mainly animals and past testing. And on top of that, the funding all goes to support supported by research. There's no negative research funding from the FDA or anything like that. They all go to supporting the cause. Now, only a couple solutions that we can do to prevent this, really, because we pretty much voted on right side of our hands with Prop 37. You can pretty much grow your own food, and that's about it, really. And on top of that, there's regulations on top of growing your own food. And on top of growing your food, they might take your property. So, well, we had, like I said, Prop 37. Prop 37 would require us to label the foods that we're going to do. Now, how many of you guys voted in the past election? Good. How many of you guys voted against Prop 37? You did. Why?
Because the cost of money actually.
Funding. Exactly. It's the exact answer for every single person. Funding. Funding, funding, funding. Now, I understand that our roads and transportation and our education system is an important thing, but how do we get there first? Do we just immediately start as adults that are able to do anything, or do we grow? We eat, we accumulate, we develop. How does that happen? Well, 20 years ago, we didn't have this crap basically in our food that we've been developing. And now we're getting our kids these foods and we're expecting a different development. Well, according to a survey by the Colorado State, Prop 37 would have only required a simple coding, very simple coding. And all you have to do is for an organic plant, a 5-digit code that started with the letter 9, the number 9, sorry. Conventional growing, which would be just like with pesticides and normal stuff, only a 4-digit code that starts with letter 4, number 4, gosh, I keep that. And then GMOs were a 5-digit number that started with the number 8. Very simple, it doesn't take out of the way, it says GMO warning, blah, blah, blah. Of course, there are going to be some fundings to like produce the stickers, do this, all kinds of stuff too. Well, in conclusion, basically over 50 different countries all around the world, including all the European nations and most of Asia, including China, North Korea, communist countries, they all have regulations on these GMOs. They all require labeling. All of them do. The only countries that really don't, Canada and the United States of America. Well, what does the world know that we don't know? We don't have the most successful economy anymore. We don't have the most successful education system anymore. So obviously we're not the smartest and most profitable at the moment. So what do they know that we don't know? Are they really doing anything for us? Well, if you guys can't do this, you guys gotta do it for younger generations. We don't know what these testing's gonna do. We simply just don't know. Because last time we thought we knew, asbestos, cigarettes, LSD, you name them, Agent Orange. These are all things that we thought we knew about. But these are all things that have negative connotations. Well, just because the government or like a government organization just says something's okay, they prove that it's not. Think about this, just food for thought. What happens in 10 years when all our food is predominant GMOs? Everything's because it's so cost efficient, so easy to use. And in 10 years down the road, we all find out it starts cancer. What are we gonna do with all the food? That's what we have.
Any, I'll see, well, who's,
I think I am.
okay.
I was able to pick out his pieces and his preview. I feel like he had good eye contact. He had a good speed. He had interesting facts, and I kind of feel like his anxiety was coming from like the way he was swaying, and then he also paced like towards the end, and then he would sigh. I kind of feel like that took away from his speech a little bit, but other than that, I thought it was pretty good.
One thing that we have in debate is called burden of proof, and that means if you make a claim, you have to back it up. And part of the thing here is you've just got lots of stuff on the table, and so I'd narrow it down. Because genetically modified foods is like a huge thing, and then you talk about genetically modified pesticides, and that's even more, right? So I would always recommend for all of you to narrow what you're trying to prove, because you usually don't have a whole lot of time to prove it, and if you cram a whole lot of stuff in, claims-wise, you almost never prove what you're trying to say. And when that happens, if you have somebody who knows anything about the topic at all, they may be debating you and you've never really proved your case, which a lot of times could actually backfire. Like if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, you're in a debate with them, what happens is they are debating against you, and if you don't back up your stuff, then you'd be better off not having started the debate in the first place. Okay? I do know, for example, that there's lots of research on genetically modified foods, and that being probably the major reason why we haven't had the massive world starvation that we've had. We've got people who've, like, I don't know if you're aware of this guy. I'll send Richard the link on it, but probably one of the most famous scientists of the 20th century was a guy that did a lot of genetically modified foods that made these high yield crops, that saved people in India and other parts of the world from starvation. So you might want to deal with that, and if your topic isn't really dealing with that, and then there's, I don't know if you heard about this, but there was some recent research on organic foods and genetically modified foods not being any different.
Okay.
And that's been in the past, month or two, where they had that. So if we know that there's a new report saying that organic foods aren't any better at all than GM foods and stuff like that, then that's in the back of our mind. And if we don't know that, then okay. But I think that's been in the news so much that I suspect half the class should have heard about that.
No.
Right? No? Well, then you guys should watch the news then, because it's been in the news a lot.
Did you
So,
trust the news?
huh?
Did you trust the news?
Well, that's where you got your stuff from.
No, I didn't.
Well, then that's my third point, is you have a lot of sources here, and like national news and GMO label, right? So these are partisan groups. It's like asking the Democratic Party what they think of Barack Obama. So if you want to persuade people, use sources that aren't partisan like that.
Well, the problem is, like I stated, is that all the funding goes to supportive of the.
Well, that's not true. There's lots of research, and if you're making that argument that all the research in the world is by people who are like evil and they're just trying to deceive us on this, first of all, there's absolutely no proof of that whatsoever. And secondly, there's lots of groups that are doing research and they're publishing it in refereed journals and stuff like that. So, I mean, if there's a big conspiracy here, that's actually not true. So, well, if you want to have a debate on it, I'd be glad to. If you can find somebody who'd like to debate it.
I don't want to debate it. I just wanted to give the speech and get it over with.
Okay. All right. But the point I'm trying to say is, if you're trying to persuade people, then you need to think about where they're coming from. And if they've heard stuff that disagrees with you, you should address that. So, I need to end, and you're a leftover then, right?
Sure, 2 people.
So Richard, 2 people?
Just 2
There's
people.
like-
Yeah.
3 people.
Well, then 3, but there's no way, because I have a class in a few minutes.
Okay.
So you can let him know. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, written for the last.
Okay. All right. I'll take all those.
Did you want me to unplug the camera for you?
Sure. I'll just take it back in there. And